Struggling to fall asleep? Meet the Ergo Pro Smart Base from Tempur-Pedic. Its gentle massage and relaxing sounds help calm your mind every night. Save up to $500 on select adjustable mattress sets at TempurPedic.com. On Breeze mattress sets only, lesser savings may apply.
Now streaming on Hulu, a wicked true crime.
It was a kidnapping, torture case.
A crime of greed and cruelty.
The men tortured the victim by beating, tasing, and burning him.
But it didn't end there.
And this is where it gets really horrible. The guy was cutting off my roommate's penis. It was like a bad dream.
This crime was horrific.
He's a psychopath.
Wicked Game, Devil in the Desert.
This was a story about greed, sadism, evil.
Now streaming only on Hulu.
You can support this podcast at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, a podcast host investigates what role his mother's boyfriend played in a 1995 murder and whether it's connected to a self-styled satanic cult. We'll review Lords of Death from Tenderfoot TV. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband, and yes, the love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hi, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
You're looking newly shorn.
Oh, I just got a haircut.
Oh. Yeah, like today, like 8 minutes ago.
Yeah. See, I don't know, like when you ladies get your hair cut, it's usually like what is being removed is rather long. And usually for us guys, right, Toby, the clippings are actually very small. And so you come back and they're just like little bits of stuff like all in your scalp.
They don't wash your hair again after they cut it?
Toby, do you get your hair shampooed after your haircut?
Fuck no.
No,
do
of
they
course
brush
not.
it with a little brushy brush?
Sure, they brush it with a little brushy brush.
With a brushy brush? I don't think they have those.
They go flick, back and forth like you're being
you
slapped
go to a
for being
proper
insolent.
barber, yeah.
Yeah, you know.
I get the hot towel.
Hot towel's nice.
On the back of my neck, and then they kind of wipe my hair with it. And
yeah.
But it's still like if you don't shower before you go to bed, you wake up in the morning and there's like this little it's like pine needles on your pillow.
Exactly, yeah.
Little gray hairs.
That sounds amazing. I wish I was a man.
Yeah, it's freaking awesome.
I wish I had short hair like you guys. Not.
Also with us is private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of The Final Curtain, Laura Bricker. Hi, Laura.
Hey, Rebecca.
What is it about being a man that you wish you got to experience, Laura? Is it having your part of your organs outside your body?
Wow, I was just going to say it would be having that, although maybe not. I don't know.
I don't think I would like that. And finally,
you don't have to do the Brazilian. You could just go, you just let it happen.
Jesus. And finally, our captain of all things cynical, author of the City Trilogy of novels, host of Rip Current, Strange Arrivals, and our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast host, Toby Ball. Hi, Toby.
Hey, Rebecca.
So, Kevin, this is Monday's program.
Mm-hmm.
What's coming up on Thursday's show?
So on Thursday, we're talking about a podcast from the BBC. It's the second season of their series Cover, and it's called Steak Knife.
All right.
But like, it's not spelled like a steak knife.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, yeah, so it's spelled STAKEKNIFE.
It's like a play on words.
It's a play on words. They have a super deep undercover agent that nobody knows about, but we're also going to be clever about the way we spell it.
Yes.
It's going to be like a play, like the stakes are so high and I will stab you in the back.
I thought it was like driving a stake into the vampire.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Something like that, yeah.
I thought it was like a stake that you stab someone with.
Driving a stake into the other guy so that I'm going to stake driven into me.
So a steak knife, yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot at stake. If
yes.
you have it, yes.
No one wants to admit this even exists, so who's going to take responsibility? I love that somebody had to come forward and it's like, no, you're spelling it wrong. It's S-T-A-K-E knife. Oh, jolly good.
I used to work with this dude who his name was Mark, nice guy. When he would leave messages, he would say, tell him Mark called, M-A-R-C. I was like, Mark, you don't have to freaking spell your name for these guys. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, if they mentally think it's a K or not, it's...
I feel like I know the Mark you're talking about. I'm going to be really honest with you. I used to work with a guy with M-A-R-C who used to always also do stuff like that. And I was like, this is a phone conversation, right? Like, no one's writing your name down.
Yeah, it was funny. I was like,
Well, I always spell my name when I call people.
You do?
L-A-R-A, no U.
Were you leaving a message?
No, not when I leave a message, but
yeah.
People are like, who are you? And I'm like, it's Lara, Lara.
So Toby, I have a question. Does this Mark guy have a French-Canadian last name that starts with L?
No.
Oh, damn it. I was sure I knew who it was. Okay.
No.
It's not that small a world.
It might be a Mark with a C. That might just be a thing that you do.
I think it is, especially if you have French-Canadian origins, which a lot of people in New Hampshire do.
Can I just do a quick callback?
Sure.
As I was standing there, there was a super long hair stuck to my microphone, which obviously did not belong to me.
I used your microphone yesterday when I was tracking.
How did you use it? You got your hair stuck in the foam.
Well, there's static, and so I'm sure a piece of hair, and I'm also losing a little bit of hair right now for some reason. So, I'm leaving a trail.
All right.
Okay.
Happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
You guys ready to talk about a podcast?
Let's do it.
Leading off.
We didn't talk about Mick and Tim for over a decade. During that time, I tried to bury it away too. But the unanswered questions about what happened have always stuck with me.
In 1995, when a woman's body was discovered in a Dayton, Ohio park, Kari thought her boyfriend Mick McQuerter and his prison buddy Tim Terrell might be involved. Before the two could skip town, Kari discovered incriminating evidence in the car.
It was a pair of shorts, women's shorts, and they were covered in blood and brain matter. Mick was sitting on the front porch, so I held them up, and my exact words were, "What the fuck happened?"
After the men went to prison, detectives turned up at Kari's looking for connections to a decades-old pair of unsolved murders on a secluded farm. Demonic symbolism at the crime scene cast suspicion on Tim, who served time with a self-styled Satanist and who sported an occultic tattoo for the Lords of Death.
Notice that everything they had like a Lords of Death symbol. What is this? That's our group. Like, what is this? This is just our gang. That's what they taught us at the time. It wasn't until sometime later, we're actually like a cult, And I'm like, a cult? Jim said he was like the leader, and Tim was his like second in command.
From Tenderfoot TV and Audacy comes the podcast Lords of Death. Host Thrasher Banks grapples with his long-held presumptions about the culpability of his mother's boyfriend Mick in the murder of Cindy Cozad. He also looks into whether Tim Terrell bludgeoned an elderly farmer in 1987, then returned a year later to kill his widow with a screwdriver through the head. Spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about plot points from Lords of Death. So if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes for our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. So Lara, if folks found VHS tapes in your basement from the 90s, what would be on them? That's a plot point in the podcast, by the way.
It is a plot point in the podcast. And think back to when you used to make recordings on VHS tapes and you'd record some show and then you might take the same tape and if you had a camcorder, you'd record something. Oh, then you might record some of the other show and commercials.
And if you didn't get to last week's episode, then you have to both of them. Yeah. And this is why I never watched The West Wing, because my tape that had Drew Carey on it was always full.
Yeah. It's crazy. So I'm thinking back, my God, I remember one time I started making theatrical productions with the old camcorder. I don't want anyone to ever see those things. God can only imagine what's on those. So I could really relate to that in the opening of this podcast when, Thrasher's talking about getting this old tape from a box of things in the basement, and you jump right into hearing some recordings and some interviews in this case when there was this murder.
A few years ago, for reasons I'll get into later, I was given a box like this. At first glance, it appeared to just be an assortment of stuff from the 1990s. Then I found this unlabeled VHS tape in a manila envelope.
So, Toby, this is kind of a multi-layered podcast, and you have a note about the layer of childhood trauma here. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, I think in some ways this podcast is really about the host, Thrasher Banks, sort of reflecting on his childhood. It sounds like his upbringing, there was a certain amount of, I don't know if chaos is the right word, but there's certainly people who are hanging out with his mom who, are doing some things that I wouldn't really want my friends doing around my young kids. And I thought there was an interesting thing right at the beginning where her boyfriend, Mick, and this other guy, Tim, don't show up. And her thought is, oh, I wonder if they got arrested.
That's the default.
Yeah, that's like if my wife was late, I wouldn't be like, maybe she got arrested for something. So anyway, the whole time I was listening to this, it in some ways just felt like he was trying to sort of come to terms with his upbringing and some of the things that happened kind of around his immediate circle and sort of make sense of them.
It's so interesting to me whenever I hear a story told from the perspective of somebody who was a child when it happened, and also his mother too. Like, 'cause you hear his mother a lot in the podcast, and they just go on and on and on about what a great guy Mick is. And I'm like, okay, this guy who was definitely there at the very least when a murder happened and then didn't do anything about it. This guy who has this horrible, scary friend, you know, like bringing chaos into their lives. But I'm like, who is the boyfriend before Mick that he's being compared to? You know what I mean? Like, he's not like a good person to have your kids around, in my opinion. It's always interesting to me to hear that like kind of memory perspective.
Well, I can relate to that. I grew up around like horse dealers and folks that were sometimes on the edge of the law. And there's a lot of people I probably shouldn't have been hanging around with at that time as well.
Yeah, yeah. So, Kevin, Thrasher Banks, very unusual name. I just have to say that out loud one time. He's been working on this for a very long time.
Yeah, we hear he's been dabbling with this for 10 years to some extent or another. And then, you know, for a guy who doesn't have a professional degree in this area, I think he does a pretty good job. Like Laura said, he's got a great bunch of source material here, which is a box filled with all the gathered evidence. And if you're a crime writer or a podcaster, that's like Christmas, like it's catnip. Like, how do you not go through all of that and decide like you want to do something with this? Because the underlying story is really interesting, even if you didn't have this personal connection to it. I mean, I don't know if he strikes the right balance between memoir and investigation, because like Toby says, like I think like the personal part of it is probably more compelling to me. Although, as I've already said, we'll get into, the different bits of the crimes involved here are like really, really compelling. But I did kind of want more of Thrasher in this.
What did you think about what we were just talking about his and his mother's sort of like very positive framing of Mick, generally speaking?
Well, yeah, I mean, generally speaking, you could have gone to jail for a very bad thing and also be a very loving boyfriend and surrogate parent to people. Both of those things can be true. And we know that Mick already had apparently one killing to his name by the time this happened. So I think a lot of this is really, I mean, it comes down to, I think, explored this theme before, where the question necessarily isn't to discover who committed this crime so much as a reflection on, was this person capable of this? Because we don't see him that way. And then you get into a lot of sort of like, okay, well, are you fooling yourself? Or why wouldn't it be? Or like, well, if he isn't the kind of person, then why did he get himself in this situation? Is that exculpatory? You know, we get into that, which is way more personal reflection. So it sounds like they want to talk more about Mick's rationalization, because they keep coming up and saying, oh, he did this to save us.
And he killed his uncle to save them. To save all of the kids.
Does it remind you about somebody that we might have written a book about?
Yes. It does.
Right, the nobility of, this was a horrible thing, but there's some nobility in it because I had this better...
I did it to protect you.
I did it to protect you after the fact, right? So, but they certainly seem to have bought into that idea. But like the thing that they're struggling with is the vibe, right? It's like, how can Mick do this? But you don't need a magic 8-ball to say, oh, all signs point to yes.
He could. He absolutely could.
He could, yeah.
And it is interesting to me, Kevin, like the thing that I think should be noted is that it's not uncommon at all, as happened with the guy who he wrote about in a book, for them to tell you a story that's extremely believable about their motivations, and for you to be like, I get that. That's the you that I know. It happened to me when I was interviewing him. Yeah. And I would come home and be like, Kevin, I really think, and Kevin would be like, Rebecca, he literally shot somebody.
But I will say, if we did not hear with our own ears from his earlier attorney about that case, I wouldn't have believed a lot of the outline of what that story was about.
He felt bad about it, but he gave a confession and statement and then did a plea on it because we pled him to a manslaughter. They didn't have anything really to put him except the testimony of the co-defendants. They didn't have a body.
I mean, you know, maybe also the defense attorney is propagating, a myth for the betterment of his client or whatever. But the whole idea, I just did it because the guy was bad and we needed to do it, without hearing the more refined details of it from someone who is to some extent a neutral arbitrator of that kind of information. It's very easy to go, yeah, he's just blowing smoke because he wants to look good for his girlfriend.
Laura, what do you think about that? This theme of trying to go back and reconcile a human being that you were close to.
This is something I've thought about a lot, like in my own life, because you have certain memories of how things were when you were a child. And sometimes it takes getting to a different stage in your life as an adult to be able to go back and look at things and see them in a different light, in a different context, and really understand kind of the whole picture of what was happening, not just the picture that you had formed as your impression as a child. Because like, think about it. He said he was 6 when this guy was first moving into his house, where he was 6 the night that this whole murder went down. Think about memories that you have from when you were 6 years old. And maybe when you've gone back and maybe talked to relatives or talked to other people or you've gotten different information is a very different kind of story. So I think it's really interesting because I think, for him personally to go on this journey, to be able to, it's something he's thought about a lot. He and his mother, they've talked about this guy. Like, we can't believe that this guy is the guy that did this because he was the guy that was with us and he was good to us at the time. So to be able to kind of trace that story now that you have a different type of, maturity and just sort of life experience, I think that's really powerful.
Yeah. So this podcast does have some production stuff around it that I'd love to talk about. There is a lot of sound, which I don't know if Kevin will want to talk about or not, but there's also a very distinctive delivery by our host. Now, I'm not talking about his physical voice. I'm talking about his delivery and read of the narration in this podcast, which is as dry as like a This American Life producer, but in a kind of different way, just like extremely straight. Toby, what did you think about that delivery?
It grew on me very quickly. I mean, it really is sort of a monotone. And I was like, is this really going to go on for like 8 hours or however long this thing is? But he gets into a rhythm that I found, it kind of drew me along. I didn't focus on it too much. Like, there were times when I felt like I was kind of reading something into it. Like, oh, he's feeling very tense about this or whatever. And then I was like, maybe this is like kind of a Rorschach thing where if there's not like a whole lot of inflection, you kind of just project whatever you're thinking they would be thinking at the time. But after the first like 5 or 8 minutes or something, I thought his narration was more effective than the This American Life stuff, which sometimes I feel is sort of affected. Yeah. And this didn't really feel that affected to me. So, I thought it worked.
Yeah, when you're doing it like that, you might just say it's like trying to portray a serious tone because of the serious manner of what you're speaking about. And you don't want to be like, hey, you can join us on Patreon.
Yes, you can.
You go to patreon.com.
Wait. We're in the business section.
Hey, if you would really like good stuff, check out us at patreon.com/partners in crime media.
No, patreon.com/partners in crime media.
Patreon.com/partners in crime media.
I like that one.
You'll do we would call that yuck voice in radio. It's like, yeah, yuck, you going, yeah. Hey, join us right now and you'll get exclusive podcasts like The Crime Writers on After Show.
Yep.
This week, Rebecca Lavoie is going to give an update from Canton, Massachusetts.
Norfolk County,
Massachusetts. No, it's not the Karen Reed case, but it's an interesting case heard by the same judge. Would you like to hear the thumbnail of what it's about?
Okay, but you can't react, guys. This is what we're talking about in the after show.
It's a woman who got into an argument with her ex-husband, and he dropped out of a heart attack, and she was charged with murder. So we're going to talk about
Norfolk County.
So we're going to talk about that. What's the argument? They were arguing about this podcast.
I'll tell you in the after show.
I'll tell you in the after show. They were arguing about the whale musical number from The Good Whale. They're like, is this genre bending?
Or does it just suck?
Or does it just suck? Yeah.
I never want to hear it again.
And that was just it? The guy just killed?
Other great podcasts you'll get include Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast, Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker podcast, and Rebecca Lavoie's Readathon. And then we also have our exclusive Married with Podcast Advice podcast, in which Rebecca and I give advice on things like
marriage.
You're going to do it too?
Pets.
Yeah.
Food.
You can also join us at the Let's Do What We Do level for episodes of Crime Writers On that are early and ad-free.
Yep.
And if you're a deep diver, you also not only get to listen to the audio podcast of Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club, but you also can watch the live recording of it and then take part in the chat, or even if you want to jump on the screen, Toby knows how to make that happen now. It's a lot of fun and very interesting. And Toby, what is your first book for 2025?
Yeah, just pretend I'm saying this in a Louisiana accent. Murder in the Bayou by Ethan Brown.
Oh.
You got to work on that accent.
And I was
totally.
trying to channel James Carville, but
yeah.
I got to practice a little
Jesus,
bit first.
that guy.
So that's all great with ways that you can support us. Also, just want to let you know it's not too late to sign up for this week's Crime Writers On newsletter. Go to crimewriterson.com. Just give us your email address. Every week you'll get a newsletter that includes things like summaries of our reviews, the pet of the week, the crime of the week, CWO behind the scenes, and all sorts of great stuff. We also there's some new merch that's available.
Yeah, there is?
There is.
What is it?
You can now get trucker hats.
Oh, okay. Just what I wanted, a hat that makes my forehead look like a billboard.
Don't you want one? Like a trucker hat?
Payne Lindsay wears trucker hats.
Or a regular baseball cap, either or, and you pick your color and it says, I enjoy a feud among subcultures?
Yes,
And you go to the game with that?
Yes, is one of the subcultures trucker hat wearers?
I don't know. I guess so. Yeah.
All right, Kevin.
Yeah.
Does thus end our business section?
Thus ends the business section.
I'm going to go ahead and fade that music out right now. All right, Kevin, let's finish up our discussion.
Yeah, because we got to make dinner.
We do?
Yeah, we almost never have time for dinner, and that's why HelloFresh is so fantastic.
Oh, HelloFresh.
So you can skip the grocery store and make cooking at home easy, fun, and affordable with HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Of course, it's delivered right to your door. But what we like about it is that you don't have to take too much time to make it. Now, of course, they got all sorts of great recipes, like the pork sausage spaghetti bolognese.
Ooh, my
It's in
favorite.
their Hall of Fame. Very easy to make. You got a little extra time. You want to put that effort into the gingery coconut chicken soup.
So good.
Sometimes, though, you just got to get it done, right? Because you've been podcasting all day. So HelloFresh's prep and bake meals come together within 5 minutes of prep, while HelloFresh's 15-minute meals are done in just 3 simple steps.
Incredible.
So you can finish up what you're doing. You can put some great food on the table. Remember, all the time, though, you also save from, like, grocery shopping.
Oh, yeah, Kevin, there's so many great options here.
Yeah, and you can get up to 10 free meals with a free high-protein item for life at HelloFresh.com/CWO10FM.
Okay, CWO10FM.
Yeah, for like 10 free meals. 1 item per box with active subscription. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. That's up to 10 free HelloFresh meals. Just go to HelloFresh.com/CWO10FM.
CWO10FM.
Dogs deserve the best, and that means fresh, healthy food. Unlike other brands, Ollie offers 5 flavors that are as nutritious as they are delicious, all made in U.S. kitchens without harmful fillers or preservatives. Head to Ollie.com, tell them all about your dog, and use code HAPPYPUP to get 60% off your welcome kit with a bonus. You'll get a storage container for a mess-free experience, and it comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee if your dog doesn't lick the bowl clean.
So, Kevin, who's our next sponsor?
Oh, we're brought to you by Quince.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, with the new year comes a new opportunity to reimagine ourselves and, more importantly, our wardrobes.
Incredible.
Refresh your look with quality pieces and stay on budget with Quince. You know what happens in January?
What?
We talk about all the things that we wanted for Christmas but never got, so we buy it for ourselves.
Yes.
That includes high-quality clothes, things that look good, feel good, and you can get that from Quince.
Kevin, I am a Quince fanatic.
You are.
I have multiple items in multiple colors of the same item from Quince. I love their cashmere sweaters.
They're cozy Mongolian cashmere sweaters.
Incredible sweaters at a great price.
Yeah, they're always priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they're able to do that by partnering directly with top factories, cutting out the cost of the middleman. No middleman.
I love how they actually show you, Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
They actually show you like what it would cost if you bought it somewhere else, like from the same place. It's incredible. So upgrade your closet this year without that upgraded price tag. Go to quince.com/crime for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/crime to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/crime. So, Laura, we need to talk about the crime that sort of kicks this off, and that's Cindy's murder. And it's not violent.
Right. And I think, we hear different versions of it.
Mick told other versions of the story. First, he said he was waiting by the car when he heard the gunshots, but later changed the story and said he was in the shelter when Tim shot Cindy. Mick even admitted to shooting Cindy once while she was on the floor. However, He later recanted that version of the story.
And then we hear from Tim, who's finally talking about what happens. And he's talking about like, yeah, we picked up this sex worker and got a blowjob and paid her money. And then the other guy went out in the shed to have sex with her. And I'm just like, already I'm cringing because I'm just thinking like, God, this poor woman. But then to hear the description of like, right after he has sex with her, he shoots her and kills her, takes back the money, the $20 they gave her, and then they went and got some beer and just like leaves her there. Also, they were driving in a Ford Escort, which again, like VHS tapes, bring back a lot of memories. But
yep, that slopey back.
It just felt so needless. I'm like, why? The way that they described it in such graphic detail, but also no big deal, just so nonchalant about it, made it even worse to hear about.
I couldn't help but think about how much of Mick's story was designed around the fact that he may or may not have had sex with a sex worker.
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
And trying to keep that fact from his partner. You know what I mean? I couldn't help. I mean, that it's not nothing. Even if Tim made this decision to pick this woman up, they were still together when it happened. So it's not like he was unaware. So that's something that occurred to me.
You know what part of this crime that never sort of added up to me, and I think they talked about it sort of in the initial telling, but because this wasn't part of the state's case, it didn't really come back to it. I don't get what happened with the bullet hole in the car. And then
it went off in his pants.
It went off in his pants?
That's what they claimed, that it went off when...
But I mean, that's way, and it blew out the window?
Yeah, that he had a loaded gun in it.
I mean, it appears that there wasn't any evidence that she was shot and killed in the car. That thing doesn't kind of add up. Just to get mad and now afterwards I shot the car, it's hard to say because, I mean, again, you're just kind of going on what Mick and Tim are saying.
Yes, and they're both, as we know, extremely reliable narrators.
Yeah.
Toby, what did you think of Mick's defense for this crime?
Look, the whole idea of, well, I did shoot her, but it was only after she was definitely dead, and I only did it to protect you. It's hard to credit, right? In that situation, I think that's the best thing you can possibly come up with as an explanation, which makes me just think that, okay, you thought it over for 20 minutes, and that was the least incriminating thing you could come up with. So that's what you said. And I guess maybe that's just sort of the reflex when people you love, see somebody in that situation. It's like, well, you want to think the best of them. But it seems like the mom might know a little bit better just in terms of, again, what sort of her default reaction is to him being late. I mean, the whole thing is so off kilter for somebody who is supposedly this really nice guy and a good boyfriend or whatever, but he's going up with his buddy and soliciting prostitutes off the side of the road and taking money they steal from a prostitute they just killed and buying beer with it and all this stuff. I mean, it's all very kind of sordid at best.
Yeah. I don't feel like Kari really deals with the whole sex worker part of this story, does she?
No. I mean, I'm sure she did, but not on Mike.
Yeah.
But she must have been thinking about that, and maybe that was just kind of the deal. I mean, maybe that was just something that he did and she was fine with it. But yeah, it's the same thing with the shot out window. I mean, it just seems like the things were so out of control that I don't think there really has to be a reason the window got shot out. It's just they were doing a lot of fucked up stuff, and that was one of the results that happened, and it doesn't make any more sense than anything else.
It doesn't help, Laura, that it seems like on its face, right? No matter what Mick's culpability was in this murder, he did have this very strange dynamic with Tim. Tim just seems scary. It's like the friend that you met that you didn't realize was a complete psychopath until they were too close to you, and then you don't know what to do because they are a complete psychopath.
So they're sleeping on your couch. Yeah.
And then he's literally living with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, anything that starts off with Tim, his buddy who he met in prison, I don't feel like that's going to end well. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think it's a very complicated relationship. We kind of first hear about kind of what Tim looks like in old, again, Polaroids. I love all these expressions. He's wearing his aviator glasses, his leather jacket. He's smoking a cigarette or holding a gun.
Always holding a gun. Wasn't that one of the descriptions of him?
Always holding a gun. You're like, okay.
Cigarette in one hand, gun in the other hand.
But he shows up with this duffel bag in Dayton, Ohio, a duffel bag, a shotgun, and a few belongings. Hey, here I am. And so, he talks about how his mother, she's uncomfortable about this, but she really loves Mick and they're going to help out his friend. But right away, besides showing up with a duffel bag and a gun, there's things that are disturbing, like when he goes out and like shoots a rabbit and like is just so callous about it, and the way that he then says something to her, you're like, this is not good. And that's even before we find out about the Lords of Death tattoo and like taking people's souls.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an interesting dynamic there too, because didn't she get a gun because of him? It's like Tim just made their life worse, like in every conceivable way.
Mm-hmm.
Toby, there's also a satanic panic angle in this story. What do you think about, that angle kind of being integrated here and in reality?
Yeah, so every time I hear about like the Satanism tie-in, like I feel like I can nail the 15-year period in which the story takes place. Feels like Satanism kind of showed up and then was like a big thing, and then it just went away. So it kind of shows how the way you put yourself out as being a scary dude, or you're really involved in stuff that's really transgressive, it really depends on where and when you're trying to do this stuff. From like 85 to like the late 90s, if you wanted to be this like kind of scary, transgressive dude who, I'm not going to let society tell me what to do. Like being a Satanist was like definitely one of the possibilities by, the early 2000s or something. If you were like, I'm a Satanist, people be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I got out of it, because all the real concerns about actual Satanists and is there like a satanic underground stuff has just been shown to be complete BS, with a couple of like really minor things that were sort of outside what people thought was the actual conspiracy, and it was just sort of people glomming onto it for reasons other than actually trying to summon the Dark Lord.
Yeah, Toby, it seems like if you're not Italian and no one's going to buy that you're in the mafia, the way to project I'm dangerous and out of control and don't mess with me is that I worship Satan.
Yeah.
And the Dark Lord will come
in
get
the
you.
mid-90s.
Well, and also like Geraldo, I didn't know he had a Satanic Panic special.
What?
I guess.
What?
I don't know.
How did you not know that?
She didn't have a
didn't have
television. That's why. Yeah.
television.
It's his second
did
best
everything.
one, next to Al Capone.
Yeah.
better
I
than
know about the Al Capone thing, but I didn't know about Geraldo's like Satanic Panic expose.
Yeah. Well, for
It
those
happened the same night of one of the murders, which we got to get to. But
yeah, and for those who don't know about the Al Capone thing, I'll just say very briefly, Geraldo Rivera had a special that was promoted like incredibly, that he found Al Capone's vault and was going to open it live on TV. And they opened it live, and Kevin, what was in it? Nothing.
Nothing really.
There's like a broken bottle.
Yeah, something.
I remember we got a keg in college for it. We're like, this is Al Capone night, and so we got a keg.
Yeah,
and then they opened it. We're like, fuck. Well, at least we got beers.
Well, we still got to drink this keg.
Yeah, but Toby, to finish your thought, there's like actually a middle ground between the Satanic Panic and like actual occult crimes, because we've seen in other podcasts like Shane and Sally that there are people sort of cosplay as occultists, and that's sort of like what their clique is, what they're doing, and they don't actually summon a demon, but they do crazy shit because it's evil, and they're not exactly all right. So the idea, like, were Tim and Jim like really in a cult, like they said when in prison? Well, maybe in their mind they were. It's just sort of like, you said, like another form of like being a gang and tapping into some kind of intimidation to like use the iconography of Satanists or of a certain gang that you're not really part of the gang or a rap group or a whatever. Like you glom onto that and make that sort of like your personality. But based on like everything that we heard, I somehow feel like it's a stretch for those detectives to think that, there was a crucifix found on the floor of the second murder.
Yeah.
And, let's Satan, and let's spend the next
Isn't a crucifix the opposite of Satan? Just saying.
Yeah,
Or you just hang it upside down.
Hang it upside down, depending on what part of the floor it was on. So, like, let's start cold calling all the self-proclaimed Satanists in Ohio, and eventually we'll get around to somebody that knows Tim or Jim or whomever, and then let's just see what they were up to. Did they have a screwdriver they could have jammed through somebody's head?
Yeah. Well, Kevin, there's also a phrasing thing in the podcast that I know that you have like a little pet peeve about how Tim is described by Thrasher.
Oh, yeah, like in some of the promos, they're like, is this a serial killer that nobody knows about? And yeah, I just, not to be pedantic about it, but like a serial killer like is considered like one of those, has a pattern of psychosexual motivated killings. Somebody who kills more than once is something else.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a multiple killer, or if it's all done like without a cooling off period, it's a spree killer. But it reminded me of sort of Scary Terry, where it's like, is this another Charles Manson?
No.
It's like, yeah, again, big swing. You don't need it. It's fine the way it is.
Yeah, exactly. A guy who
don't need to embellish it. It's still really interesting.
A guy who may have killed multiple people is interesting enough without giving him a dorky
I mean, we're already
label.
calling this thing Lords of Death, so you're leaning into the Satan aspect as opposed to the parts that we found really interesting, which was the personal narrative of it. But
yeah. There was one thing I found interesting, Laura, is that, Thrasher does this thing that I have mixed feelings about when podcasters do this. I don't have mixed feelings. I typically don't like it. When they sort of say that they're not a journalist on like intentionally so that you'll hear it.
I have no credentials.
Exactly. It's like why are you telling me that? Like, it doesn't excuse bad behavior if you tell me that. That being said,
I don't know how to cook. Here's dinner.
Exactly.
Well, it's like when I make something, like I make a new recipe and I go, oh, I don't think it's going to be very good before we've even tried it.
Exactly. But it also doesn't absolve you of being unethical if you don't do that. But that being said, he does do a journalism thing. Like, he finds sources for a pair of murders by going to this little town and like finding people to talk to. I mean, that's Thrasher. That's journalism, right, Laura?
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that he's finding sources, he's getting the information, he's asking questions, he's confirming the information, he's trying to make sure that he's getting a full picture of the story by actually talking to the people who were there and the people that, were relatives of the people that were there. So, yeah, it's one of those things where that disclaimer you put out there, it's like, no, oh shucks, I'm not a journalist, or oh shucks, I'm just a little old person with a story to tell. But he did a good job.
It's never going to be as bad as that podcast that's on the wall of shame, though, right, Kevin?
The Unborn? We don't know what we're doing, but we love podcasting. But like we were saying with House of Bottles, Lord, back me up on this, right? Yeah. We were saying, okay, you have a rookie here in House of Bottles with sort of like no professional training this, but they're just doing it, and it got really bad. But here you have somebody sort of in the same situation, but they're surrounded by people that are experienced and helping them craft the story. And like the idea of like not saying till the end of the first episode that Kari, who we're talking about, is his mom. Reminded me of the Ballad of Billy Balls. So it's like, nice twist. Way to make that happen. And then when we're like, oh, now this makes sense why you had the box of stuff. You guys are right. There's no need to apologize up front about like, prepare for this to be bad.
Yeah.
But like that still means that like you can construct a podcast that's really good, or at least a narrative that's cohesive.
I'll just say, this is not the first podcast we've heard from Tenderfoot that has that trait of taking an amateur and making a thing that sounds pretty good out of it. Dear Alana was the same thing. And so clearly, like, there's a team there that they wrap around somebody with a story. But, whoever's editing this and producing this definitely took, I was like, when he said, I interviewed this person in 2018, I'm like, that would be hell to edit somebody who had all this old ass material and make it seem like today, make it seem like really like a story we need to hear. Now, that's hard. That's a hard thing to do. And clearly they have some experience doing that.
Yeah, I wanted to hear Mick at the end, though, because we get him in the beginning. And I really thought the whole like final conversation with Kari, the mom, was like very lovely, and like they're hatching stuff out and she's apologizing.
You guys saved me more than you'll ever know. You really did. And I've said it many times, if it wasn't for you and your sister, I probably still wouldn't be here. And I mean that. I really mean it. But I'm sorry that you guys went through what you went through over choices that I made.
And we heard from Mick early on, and he was very nice about, like, open about his feelings about being with those kids when they were young. And I just kind of I don't know why they didn't have that, but that's the only thing I thought would have tied this up in a nice bow, is the emotional thing. We get Kari's sort of emotional feeling. If we could sort of get Mick's as well, that would have been the icing on the cake.
Dogs deserve the best, and that means fresh, healthy food. Unlike other brands, Ollie offers 5 flavors that are as nutritious as they are delicious, all made in U.S. kitchens without harmful fillers or preservatives. Head to Ollie.com, tell them all about your dog, And use code HAPPYPUP to get 60% off your welcome kit with a bonus. You'll get a storage container for a mess-free experience. And it comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee if your dog doesn't lick the bowl clean.
Struggling to fall asleep? Meet the Ergo Pro Smart Base from Tempur-Pedic. Its gentle massage and relaxing sounds help calm your mind every night. Save up to $500 on select adjustable mattress sets at TempurPedic.com. On Breeze mattress sets only, lesser savings may apply.
Now streaming on Hulu, a wicked true crime.
It was a kidnapping, torture case.
A crime of greed and cruelty.
The men tortured the victim by beating, tasing, and burning him.
But it didn't end there.
And this is where it gets really horrible. The guy was cutting off my roommate's penis. It was like a bad dream.
This crime was horrific.
He's a psychopath.
Wicked Game, Devil in the Desert.
This was a story about greed, sadism, evil.
Now streaming only on Hulu.
This cold and flu season, Instacart is here to help deliver all of your sick day essentials. Whether you're in prevention mode and need vitamins, hand sanitizer, and that lemon tea your Nana swears by, or you're in healing mode and need medicine, soup, and a lot more tissues. Simply download the Instacart app to get sick day supplies that reinvigorate or relieve delivered in as fast as 30 minutes. Plus, enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 orders. Excludes restaurant orders. Service fees and terms apply.
All right, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out the podcast Lords of Death from Tenderfoot TV and Audacy. Laura Bricker, thumbs up or thumbs down for Lords of Death?
Yeah, I'm going to go thumbs up on this. You know, we listen to a lot of true crime podcasts, and often I'm like, why now? Why is this person telling a story? A lot of times I come away feeling like a connection to a case has sort of been orchestrated just simply for the fact that somebody wants to do a true crime podcast. And in this podcast, the host, Thrasher Banks, has a personal connection to a case that he then is going to go back and reinvestigate, really because it's something that connects to his life. And so you feel like there's a reason this is being told. There's very interesting cast of characters. We hear from a lot of the characters. He's not a professional podcaster or journalist, but he's got a lot of the voices of people that were involved. I don't think we even got into, in our review, one of these guys who called him on the phone and was just like a wild character. Going ranting and raving about some of the other characters.
I know who you are.
Yeah. I was like, oh my God. Then we had like anonymous texters. Like there's a lot of intrigue in this podcast, but it's interesting in the way that it's told. I wish there was a little bit more of his sort of own personal takeaway from this to kind of bring more of an emotional connection when this is wrapped up. But overall, I thought it was really interesting and I would give it a thumbs up.
Toby Ball, thumbs up or thumbs down for Lords of Death?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where I am too. You know, if you hadn't said that he wasn't a journalist, I would have just assumed that he kind of was.
Yeah.
You know, more so than a lot of stuff we listened to, I kind of felt as though without sort of centering it in like the narration and stuff, a lot of this was about the host kind of thinking about the way things had been sort of earlier in his life. And it's a little messy, not in the way that it's told, but in sort of the things that it's talking about. A lot of things aren't super straightforward, but not in a way that I think detracts from sort of what he's trying to get at. So, yeah, I thought it was pretty good. I give it a thumbs up.
Kevin Flynn.
Yeah, I'm a thumbs up, a mild thumbs up. I feel like the spectrum on the reaction to this podcast could really go the wavelength part, like you just go like really from like, I really, really like this to, oh, this is kind of meandering and monotone or whatever. But I liked it. I mean, I thought that it's not perfect, but the story's really interesting. There are a couple of different crimes, and I don't know if like we really are focusing so much on, no, this is the person that went to the farm, and this is the reason why this happened on this night. And then the uncle in the past. I don't know if we're like the whodunit part of it, but I think it's probably best when it's more the meditation about the people involved. And then you can have your own opinion about, oh, was this person right? Are they fooling themselves? Like, you're entitled to have your opinions about that. And I think that's where Lords of Death, which implies this is about a satanic cult. And I think it's much more than that. So I'm a thumbs up.
I'm a mild thumbs up too, Kevin. I did not enjoy this podcast when I first started listening to it, except for the final moments of episode 1. I started really appreciating the work and the craft that went into this and the editing that went into it a little bit later in the series when Thrasher is actually investigating an older pair of crimes, and the sourcing and the people that he talks to is just, I really admire any journalist, and Thrasher, as far as I'm concerned in this podcast, you are one, for talking to people sort of across the spectrum in all walks of life and in no way commenting on the walk of life that person is in, just getting their perspective. And there was a lot of that. There was a lot of sort of talking to people that other less experienced hosts may have been tempted to describe physically or talk about what their house looked like or whatever. And there was just none of that. And it was so clean. And so that's really when I started really appreciating what this was about. So he was doing this investigation. Yes, I do wish, like everybody else, that there was some more personal interaction with the story on his part rather than just tape narration, because I think that it is a deeply personal thing to question everything you thought about something when you were a little kid. So yeah, mild thumbs up for me for this podcast. I think some people will really, really like it. Now it's time for my favorite part of the podcast, a little something I like to call
the crime of the week.
The crime of the week. When a man in Indiana fell through the ice trying to rescue his dog from a half-frozen pond, he needed someone to throw him a lifeline. His cries for help were heard by a neighbor who happened to be carrying a long rope. That's because the man is a professional rope jumper. David Fisher was able to throw the drowning man his double Dutch rope and pull him and the dog to safety. Fisher performs professionally as the rope warrior and holds 3 Guinness Book World Records for tricks like jumping rope while sitting on the ground. Fisher had skipped rope for the enjoyment of over 5 million school children, 100 TV shows, and 2 presidents. He even published a children's book about a rope-jumping superhero who uses his laser rope to defeat Varko, leader of the Kirbarian Space Chameleons. This time, Fisher got to be the hero, and the fire chief and mayor of Westfield presented him with an award. It was a ceremony that he was determined not to skip. So, panel, here's my question for you. Maybe the rope warrior should team up with other superheroes with similar abilities. Lara Bricker, who else will join his Justice League?
This is kind of a no-brainer. He needs Lara Bricker, cat detective, amateur lassoer to join him.
Yeah, absolutely. Toby, who do you think is going to join the Rope Warriors' future Justice League?
Pogo stick woman.
What about you, Kevin?
The hopscotcher.
Oh.
He jumps on the villain with 1 hop and then another hop and then 2 feet and then 1 foot and then 2 feet and then 1 foot and then spins back around and then does it all again.
Got it.
But he has
I
to
understand
skip
what
one,
you're laying
right?
down.
Isn't there?
He does have to skip one. Yeah, he skips
whatever
2.
when the rock is on or whatever.
Exactly.
All right, Lara Bricker, folks want to reach out to you to say hi online. How can they find you there?
They can find me at Lara Bricker on Blue Sky and Instagram.
What about you, Toby? How can you be found online?
At Blue Sky, at TobyBall NH.
Kevin Flynn.
I'm at Kevin P. Flynn.
You can follow me everywhere on Instagram, on Blue Sky. I'm still on Twitter. I can't help it. That's where all the Karen Reed news is. Also, you can find Crime Writers On everywhere at Crime Writers On. I'm at Reb Lavoie. And I encourage you to join our incredible community in our official Crime Writers On Facebook discussion group. We've got new members joining every week. People there are so great and so insightful, and there are some really interesting conversations that have nothing to do with this show. Get episodes early and ad-free and all the other stuff we make at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia. Our theme song was composed and performed by Tyler Gibbons. Our editor is the truly wonderful Livy Burdett. The EP of this show is Kevin Flynn. This show is recorded in Studio C, the closet in our New Hampshire basement, where we also keep cardboard boxes filled with evidence from old homicides. It's actually kind of true. On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later.
Well, I was going to talk about
Did you hear that?
Did I hear what?
Okay, then never mind.
No, what was that? Something in the...
It's just noisy outside. Deborah's shoveling the walk. It's like...
Do you have the window open?
No, I just, I guess I'm just I'm very sensitive.
Maybe it's another earthquake.
I'm very sensitive.
I think we're getting ready for the big one.
Do you live in Limetown?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it's extra fully.
Partners in Crime Media.
Is hot sleep keeping you up? The Tempur-Pedic Breeze mattress pulls heat away from your body, so it feels up to 10 degrees cooler. Save up to $500 on select adjustable mattress sets at TempurPedic.com. On Breeze mattress sets only. Lesser savings may apply.